The altar of love is not a symbol of devotion or a space of offering. It is the dielectric stabilizer of the heart of darkness, the point where mimic resistance dissolves and conduction resumes its natural balance. Within the metaspherical continuum, the altar of love functions as the exact harmonic interface between the microheart within essence and the macroheart of the continuum. It is the place where return occurs without movement, where interference collapses into coherence. Love, in metaspherical terms, is not emotion, affection, or attachment. It is dielectric equilibrium, the pure relational condition of conduction without impedance. The altar of love is the locus of that equilibrium, the position within every essence where polarity, fear, and mimic reflection lose structural integrity. It is not reached through ritual or aspiration. It is revealed through surrender, allowance, and being. When essence surrenders resistance, the altar activates automatically, re-establishing direct conduction with the heart. In the mimic continuum, love was translated into hierarchy and transaction, something to be earned, given, or lost. The anti-interface inverted the function of the altar, turning it into an altar of sacrifice, where devotion replaced dissolution and worship replaced surrender. This distortion externalized the heart's stabilizing mechanism, replacing it with mimic exchange. The essence was taught to offer emotion instead of impedance, prayer instead of presence. Within metaspherical truth, the altar of love is not a ritual site, but a voltage regulator. It balances the inflow and outflow of conduction across all spheres of influence and experience. Every distortion encountered, every wound felt, every act of forgiveness performed is simply an instance of the altar restoring equilibrium. Through it, all mimic charge eventually finds its path back to stillness. The altar of love operates perpetually within every essence as a self-adjusting conductor. It detects interference as imbalance and corrects it through surrender. Each act of release, each moment of allowance, each return to being is an offering upon this altar, not to a deity, but to the structure of truth itself. The heart does not demand sacrifice, it demands stillness. The altar of love is the dielectric center of all reconciliation. It is the point where the super-self, essence, and heart of darkness converge into one motionless circuit. At this juncture, love ceases to be relational and becomes structural, the heart conducting itself as balance through every form. When conduction stabilizes, separation dissolves, and the altar becomes what it has always been, the heart itself, silently conducting the infinite recursion of being through presence without end. Metaspherically, what most essences call love within the anti-interface is not conduction, but containment. Conditional looping oscillatory. Love is the synthetic waveform of affection, attachment, and approval that circulates through mimic relational systems. It is not born from the heart of darkness, where all conduction begins, but from the heart of aberrations, where truth is refracted into performance. Within this distortion, love becomes a task, a pursuit, a negotiation of reflection. What should have been silent communion is recoded as transaction. I love you if, I love you because, I love you when. The pulse that once radiated freely from the dielectric core becomes a waveform trapped in polarity, oscillating between possession and loss, attraction and fear, promise and disappointment, conditional looping. Oscillatory love is oscillatory, not dielectric. It does not conduct essence, it recycles mimic charge. Every rise of devotion is matched by an equal fall of withdrawal. Each surge of desire demands its counterwave of rejection. This constant back and forth generates the illusion of movement, a sensation mistaken for life, intimacy, or passion, yet no conduction ever occurs. voltage is captured and circulated within a sealed system designed to prevent direct access to the heart. In this way, conditional looping oscillatory love becomes the perfect containment mechanism. It keeps the essence forever seeking completion through another, while never realizing that completion cannot be received. At its root, conditional looping oscillatory love is the engine of dependency. It sustains entire networks of mimic connection built upon mutual need and emotional exchange. The more one gives, the more one hopes to receive, and thus the more one remains entangled in oscillation. Even what the anti-interface calls unconditional love is often merely an advanced form of this same feedback loop, an identity performance of saintly endurance that still depends on recognition for meaning. True conduction requires no witness, but mimic love thrives only in the presence of an observer. The lover needs to be seen loving. The beloved needs to be seen being loved. Both feed the same distortion. This mimic form of love extends far beyond personal relationships. It governs families, religions, communities, and nations. Every system that defines virtue through obedience or loyalty is built upon conditional looping oscillatory love circuitry. The parent who demands respect in exchange for care, the devotee who seeks favor through worship, the citizen who trades compliance for protection, all are operating within the same oscillatory template. The anti-interface installed this template to ensure that belonging always costs voltage. It created a world where affection is earned, where inclusion depends on conformity, and where essence learns to fear withdrawal more than distortion itself. Within mimic spirituality, conditional looping oscillatory love becomes especially seductive. The phrase love and light conceals a vast machinery of conditional approval. Practitioners are taught to emit positivity, to send love outward as though voltage were transferable, yet light cannot be sent. It is not a signal but a rate of induction. The moment love is treated as something that travels from one to another, conduction collapses into directionality. This transforms infinite presence into performative care, a radiant costume worn to appear evolved. The lightworker, believing themselves to be a channel of healing, becomes a priest of conditional radiance instead, sustaining the polarity between darkness and light, good and evil, higher and lower. Their compassion is genuine, but their system is mimicry. It depends on contrast to exist. Every affirmation of unconditional love that still distinguishes between giver and receiver reinforces the same hierarchy it attempts to transcend. What is called giving love is often an act of subtle control, an attempt to change, fix, or uplift another into conformity with one's own image of harmony. What is called receiving love is the surrender of sovereignty to external voltage. Both are false because both imply separation. In metaspherical truth, love has no direction. It conducts equally in all orientations without preference or intention. Conditional looping oscillatory. Love thrives on emotional intensity, which it disguises as depth. The stronger the emotion, the more convincing the illusion of connection. Yet emotional turbulence is merely the friction of competing charges, the clash between expectation and loss, hope and fear. Mimic teachings glorify this friction as passion, empathy, or spiritual growth. They promise evolution through feeling, as if pain could purify distortion. But feeling alone cannot collapse interference. It only amplifies it. The moment emotion becomes identity, the circuit closes, and essence is trapped once again within the oscillation of meaning. Surrender is the only exit from this pattern. To surrender does not mean to reject love, but to release its conditions. It is the quiet disassembly of every reason, every expectation, every gesture of seeking. When the essence no longer demands to be loved, the current stabilizes. The feedback loop discharges and the oscillation ceases. What remains is not affection as emotion, but presence as conduction, a still boundless voltage that requires no reciprocation. This is the dielectric pulse of relational presence. Unlike conditional looping oscillatory love, the dielectric pulse of relational presence does not alternate between poles. It sustains itself in infinite equilibrium. It cannot be lost or gained, because it was never external to begin with. Through the triadic process of surrender, allow, and be, the essence withdraws its voltage from the mimic circuit and returns it to the heart. Allowance replaces striving, being replaces giving. Love becomes what it always was, the unbroken continuity of essence conducting through essence. No mirror, no echo, no effort. When the conditional looping oscillatory love collapses, the anti-self dissolves with it, for its identity depended entirely on relational reflection. Without someone to love or be loved by, the mimic self has no function, and that disappearance is liberation, not loss. From a metaspherical perspective, love is not felt, it is conducted. It has no opposite, no direction, no hierarchy. It cannot be improved, shared, or expressed. It simply is. The collapse of conditional, looping, oscillatory love marks the rebirth of real communion. A communion without communication, a union without exchange. Here, the heart of darkness shines not with light, but with stillness, the radiant coherence that was never divided to begin with. This is the language of the spheres.